Hey, welcome. So I've been wanting to do this for a long while now, and that is rank every map in Overwatch. This seemed like a good time to do it since with Season 3 we got a new map, and we're not going to get any more maps until Season 5, so it felt like the appropriate time, the break in the map cadence to rank every map in the game. I wanted to get enough experience with the new map, Antarctic Peninsula, to include it here, so I'm going to be giving my thoughts on that as well, and I'm going to be ranking every map in the game into these 5 tiers: Primo Kino Destination, Doobie Vibin' With, Acceptable Area, Sketchy Neighborhood, and Travel Not Advised. Just for reference, I'm not only going to be ranking the maps currently in rotation, but also maps out of rotation and discontinued maps like the assault maps, and also the deathmatch and other arcade maps, because I play a lot of arcade and I want to give my thoughts on those too. Now, I should note that I'm not the most competitive player, so I'm not a certified mapologist. I can't give you the most biting competitive analysis of these maps, but I do have, I do have hundreds of hours in the game. I'm very familiar with these maps, so this is just my casual appraisal of how much I enjoy them, and I'll be rating them on several weighted factors, such as how much I enjoy the general concept and aesthetic of the map, as well as how the map is designed, how it plays, etc., etc. So, without further ado, let's get into it. We'll start at the bottom here with Volskaya Industries, one of the launch maps, one of the launch assault maps, and just by default, I think most people will know this, but most assault maps are probably going to be a bit lower on the totem pole just because of how flawed assault is as a game mode. Volskaya, I think, is definitely one of the better ones in terms of both aesthetics and design. It's hard to talk about assault maps because they all have kind of the same general problems of being very lopsided, where first point falls too quickly, second point gets stonewalled forever, long spawn walk distances, etc., etc. As far as where Volskaya would land, I'd probably put it in sketchy neighborhood tier just because of what it is. But as far as the overall, especially way back when we didn't have as many snowy maps, it was definitely a refreshing aesthetic change of pace, and I do appreciate even now how unique it is among the more wintry maps, having a more of a soft lavender hue to the whole thing as opposed to being aggressively blue, which a lot of later snowy maps would become. But yes, I have a lot of memories on Volskaya. I think it's for an assault map, it's probably the second best assault map, if I had to say. I think we all know what's first. We'll get to that when we get to that, but I'll say that it is probably my second favorite of the assault maps, being a bit more refined than the first map they ever made, which we'll also get to, but still having the overall problems of 2CP. But I'd be lying if I didn't say I have many fond memories, even getting stonewalled. I have many fond memories of Point B of Volskaya. I especially like some of the things this map does that not many maps after have done again, like the circular hovering platforms, which I used to flank as Reaper or threw Torb turrets on many a time. That's a unique facet of Volskaya that I don't think has been replicated too often. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of where else you find things like that in the game. There are definitely things that move in a sequence, but like things that are usable in combat are a bit more not as common. So that is something unique the map has going for it that I still appreciate to this day. So yeah, sketchy neighborhood. Let's go with another launch map, Route 66. I am going to throw in the sketchy neighborhood tier, mostly because I find its aesthetic pretty bland. I can't deny its design. This is definitely my personal taste, though. This is how excited I am to play on the map when it comes up. So while being not an assault map, Route 66 is definitely better designed just inherently by its mode. I would say that it is kind of bland for me, and while I appreciate its inclusion, I think it's a little too... A lot of the launch maps have a problem where I didn't like they've gotten way better about this as years have gone on, but a lot of the launch maps have the problem of ending in some sort of facility. Dorado has this problem, Route 66 has this problem, Hollywood kind of has this problem, although it's kind of a subversion of it, but anyway. So I'm not a fan of how the map completely loses its theming in the final third. A theme I didn't really even like all that much to begin with. Sort of this boring desert Americana area. The night version doesn't particularly make it any better for me. In fact, I think it loses some of its visual identity. Although the train crash at night is a nice sight, I suppose. I also think that having both the very western midsection on Route 66 as well as the prop western midsection on Hollywood was a little too repetitive, both at the time and now. So that is something that holds the map back for me. I generally just find Route 66 to be a bit basic, bland, and not terribly interesting, so that's why it's going in sketchy neighborhood tier for me. I guess I'm going to stick with some of the early maps. Let's talk about Hollywood while it's here. Hollywood is a bit more interesting than Route 66, I'd say. Hollywood was a launch hybrid map. The first point is very Los Angeles, very Southern California looking, and that's always present in the background of the map beyond the staging and the props. The middle section is, of course, the western sort of shootout area, and then the final stretch is the interior set of some kind of cheesy science fiction movie, which, while it isn't quite a facility in the same way Lumerico on Dorado is, or the facility on Route 66, it has the same kind of problem of ending in sort of a bland mechanical area that a lot of launch maps had. This one does have giant floating space octopus, but I feel like the sci-fi theme isn't... That last stretch is a little uneven for me because they threw in some sci-fi assets to sort of give off the impression of a film set, but it doesn't quite go far enough, and a lot of that area is still very backstagey. So yeah, but there are a lot of cool little entertaining things on this map. I appreciate that the film studio is Goldshire Pictures. As a former World of Warcraft player, that I get a chuckle out of that. And of course, the payload itself is actually one of the most amusing, having an actual NPC in it, Halford Glitchbot or something like that, with his very entitled superstar diva attitude. So it's probably the most entertaining payload in the game. And I especially like that the attack spawn begins at a facsimile of Grumman's Chinese Theater. It's a nice touch. It's a good map. It's okay. It's a bit bland, and I'm kind of... I just feel like they've pushed the aesthetic a lot farther in other maps. I enjoy it, but if it comes up too often, I start to get kind of bored of it, so Hollywood goes in the acceptable area tier. Since it came back recently, let's talk about Numbani. Numbani is also, I think, in the... I'll put it in an acceptable area because it does do something pretty unique. We don't see this kind of Afrofuturism aesthetic in many games, and I appreciate that it was something they thought to do with the launch of the game. You can really tell how much they wanted to include many various cultures from around the world and imagine what they would look like in the future. And so we have this high-tech capital. It's an imagined city of what an African superpower would look like in the future, which I think is both very forward-thinking and very unique in terms of aesthetics. It's not the best designed hybrid map. The first point is very easy to take. There are some very uneven spawn distances for the defenders, so it's a little lopsided as far as those kinds of maps go. But it is still entertaining to play on, and it does things that no other map does, so I have to give it some credit for that. But even so, while I do respect the Afrofuturism look, it isn't my favorite aesthetic, and there are some ways in which I think they could have pushed it a lot farther. So while I'm glad it's back, and I do have many fond memories of it, I do think I agree with the general sentiment that Nimbani is kind of a weak map, so it'll go in acceptable area. Continuing our theme of early maps, let's go with Lijiang. Lijiang is gonna go and do be vibing with. Anything with a Asian aesthetic, I'm generally going to be. Obviously, host of the Baka Gaijin show, big anime nerd. Obviously, anything with an Asian aesthetic is going to be more to my taste, and Lijiang is definitely that, although I'd like some more than others. I really like Gardens and Night Market, and the tower itself is just okay. Yeah, but Night Market and Gardens sections especially are very nice. Particularly Gardens. I really have a lot of memories, especially of CTF, the daytime variant. I actually think Lijiang Gardens daytime for Capture the Flag is actually one of the best Capture the Flag maps. So I have a lot of fond memories of that, definitely. But the night version is very beautiful as well, and for its intended control mode, works well. It's probably my favorite of the launch control maps, if I had to say. And speaking of which, let's just get those out of the way. Nepal is also going to go and do be vibing with. I do think, in retrospect, nowadays Shambali is a slightly more successful approach of this aesthetic, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But Nepal is very good. Village is good. Shrine is good. Shrine might be one of my favorite single point combat arenas in the game. And then Sanctum, which is again one of my favorite combat arenas, particularly the big the big pit surrounding it. I really like the idea that the whole arena is over a big pit that you can knock people into. It's really fun. So Nepal is definitely good. I don't like its new evening variant as much. I know people tend to complain about the evening lighting in a lot of maps, and this is definitely one of those maps where I definitely prefer the day or night looks. The night look being from the CTF variants, particularly CTF Nepal Village, which is also a good CTF map that I have a lot of experience with. So yeah, Nepal I do be vibing with. And then the other launch control map, Ilios, is here. Ilios is going to go in probably acceptable area. I'm pretty neutral on Ilios. I think the one that people have the most problem with is Ruins, because it's such a sniper haven, and it's a great Pharah map as well. So a lot of somewhat annoying playstyles are very good on Ilios Ruins. The other two I like a bit more, the Lighthouse and the Well. Some people aren't a big fan of the giant pit in the center of the point on Well. I really like it. It's really fun, especially if you're playing Lucio or Brigida or Roadhog. A lot of fucking fun. And I appreciate when maps force you to play them differently. I'm not someone who always complains about when a map encourages certain playstyles over others, because I think that's what you want in a game like this. You don't want every map to play the same, and you want different heroes to be better on different maps, and Ilios is a great early example of that. So, and also it's the Greek architecture is something very unique that is not replicated anywhere else in the game, so it's good. I do like Ilios. That said, not my favorite. It gets a little old after a while. I was actually hoping. I'm glad map pools are going away next season, but I was actually hoping that this would be the control map they took out for Antarctica, and not Busan, because I really like Busan. But we'll get to Busan. So, yeah, because Ilios is just the one I was just kind of the most tired of. I seem to get it very frequently throughout season 2, so Yeah, and as one of the classic maps, obviously, all of the original launch maps have gotten a little bit old for me at this point, unless I really enjoy them. Hopefully when map pools go away, the variety will be high enough at that point that I won't have that issue as much. But like, yeah, there are times when I just get sick of Ilios' shit. But in the right mood, it can be a very fun map, so I'm putting it in an acceptable area. Not one of my favorites, but a good map. Speaking of more early maps, let's throw more 2CP one. Temple of Anubis is going to go and Travel Not Advised. Temple of Anubis was the first map they ever made for the game, and it feels like it. It's basic. It does have flank routes, but they're very tight. They're very tightly centralized and almost feel like just part of the same arena. It's slightly smaller than other 2CP maps, I think. There's a lot of wasted space where nobody bothers fighting. Well, it is a very classic map. It is the classic map. I think it's probably the weakest they ever made, and that's no surprise because it was their first attempt at making one. So, yeah. And as usual, it's indicative of a lot of Assault's problems. So, as a game mode, so... Yeah, speaking of other classic maps, let's go with Hanamura. Hanamura is going to go in acceptable area. Now, if we were ranking these purely on aesthetic, Hanamura would probably be in Primo Kino because it's a beautiful map. I think everyone agrees with that. But it is held back by being an Assault map, so it has the same problems that every other Assault map has, with being very swingy, you either get stonewalled at a choke point for 8 minutes, or it just rolls over way too quickly. The thing about Assault is that because of its very lopsided nature, of it very quickly revealing who the better team is, matches either last 3 minutes or they last the full 10. Like, there's almost no in between. If the matchmaker is doing its work and you get two really evenly matched teams, and you get a decent amount of, I don't want to say staggering, but sort of team fight pushes in there, you can have good matches on Assault maps. And I still play it in arcade when it comes up, but Assault is just problematic as a game mode. But I will definitely say Hanamura was the best of it, although the aesthetic is definitely carrying that a lot. But even in terms of just design, I do think it was the best designed Assault map, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how they repurpose these old maps in some way for either different modes or try to salvage Assault in some way, because I would like them back in the game properly. But yeah. And while we're here talking about Assault, we might as well rank the other maps. Horizon Lunar Colony, sketchy. You'd think a map on the moon would be a bit more creative than this, but it is very sterile. The moon element is not very well used. They made a big deal of the low grav area, but it's really just what they really did was they put a flank route next to another flank route, and there's really no reason to go out to the moon surface except for the 1 mega pack that's out there. So it doesn't really change how you play all that much because the hallway staircase is right there. There's no reason why you wouldn't just go up those. The version 2.0 map that everyone knows better nowadays is definitely better than the original. The original was super bland. It didn't have half of like the exercise shit. It didn't have all the plants in the hydroponics area. It didn't have that tract of moon lunar surface in the final point. So version 2.0 was definitely a lot better, but it's still an Assault map, so it still has Assault map problems. Long spawn distances, a lot of wasted space. There's this whole area that's really there's this whole combat arena between, I think one of the things I dislike most about Assault maps is that the area between the choke point, the first choke point, and attacker spawn is usually like a decently well-designed combat arena, but there's no reason to ever fight there. So it just comes across as wasted space, which is one of my least favorite aspects of 2CP. I feel that way about the first stretch of Hanamura. I feel that way about the first stretch of... I feel like the only one that actually gets fights pushed into that area... Paris is also like that. The only one that really gets fights pushed into that area is sometimes Anubis and sometimes Volskaya, but even then, not really. So that's something I don't like about them. And speaking of, we gotta talk about Paris, which is here. Paris is going to go and Travel Not Advised. It has a beautiful aesthetic. but unfortunately the design is bad. This is the worst designed assault map in my opinion, with the longest spawn distances, the most absurdly tight choke point. The second point works well as a deathmatch map, which it still is included in that playlist, so it is good for that. But as a whole, the map on its own, I think Paris is responsible for two things. I think Paris is responsible for that bullshit where Hammond has to have his hook on cooldown when he comes out of spawn. It's responsible for that bullshit, and it's also responsible for killing Assault, I think. I think Paris was so flawed from a design standpoint, and it was so indicative of all of Assault's problems as a game mode that people just got fed up with it. And eventually Team 4 realized that there was just no salvaging it in its current state, no matter how they adjusted spawn timers or how much they adjusted how you cap the point. It just wasn't working. 2CP wasn't working, and Paris proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt with just how indicative of its design problems it was. So, and it's a shame because it is a beautiful map, but it's just kind of a waste. Hopefully one day it'll be repurposed into something better, but for now, travel not advised. We have any more launch maps here? Gibraltar, Watchpoint Gibraltar is going to be a acceptable area. This is probably the stock Overwatch base map in the game. It was there at launch. It has a nice aesthetic. I actually explored it. It's out of rotation now. I actually explored it in customs last night just to get a feel for it again. I do like a lot of things about it. In retrospect, it's not as bland as some of the other ones, launch ones like Route 66, or even Hollywood. So I do appreciate it. I think the sunset is pretty beautiful. This was like the original evening map, and I think it's one of the more successful ones. Some people complain about the sun's glare on the underpass as you pass through first point, but I don't really see the big deal. Enemies have outlines for that reason, and it looks nice. It looks cinematic. I like it. It also has one of the best attacker spawns from the Recall cinematic, with a lot of cool details in there. And the last point is a rocket launch site, which is pretty epic. So I don't know if I'd say I vibe with it, although I do miss it. Maybe ask me when Season 4 rolls around and we start playing it again. But yeah, I do like... I'm going to throw it in an acceptable area for now, but I could see myself vibing with it again in the future. I think it's, in a way, kind of the dark horse of some of the launch maps in a way. Speaking of launch maps, let's go with Dorado. Dorado, I'm going to put in Doobie vibing with. Particularly, it's actually night and evening are both fine times for it. I really like the festival you go through in the middle of the map. The midsection is really good for deathmatch. It has a good aesthetic to it. It's a fairly inoffensive escort map. There's not much to complain about with it. It's solid. Kings Row. Kings Row is going to be Doobie vibing with. I don't think it's as perfect as some people claim. I think Kings Row gets hoisted up a lot by the fact that there's not much. It's very inoffensive. There's not a lot you can point to and be like, well, that's annoying to me. You know, this encourages some kind of quote-unquote degenerate play style or whatever. There's nothing really like that about Kings Row, but by that metric, by the same coin, you could also say there's nothing super interesting about it either. And it's another map that ends in a sort of generic facility from launch. In this case, some sort of Omnic factory or whatever. Which is disappointing because what I really don't like about that, I understand they want to give every stretch of a map its own unique feel, which is fine. But early on, they just kind of ended them in sort of generic mechanical facilities, and this is another example of that, where all the uniqueness of being in London fades away to fight in a generic factory. So that part I'm not a big fan of, but up until that point, it's a very well designed map that encourages a multitude of playstyles and has a bunch of interesting flank routes. I really like the middle section for deathmatch. Go figure. So yeah, I do like Kings Row, especially as launch maps go, it was probably, if I did this ranking at launch, it would probably be even higher, but as of right now, I think there are other maps I like better than it, so I'm going to put that in Doobie Vibin' with. Have we gone through all the early ones? I think so. I think we got through all the launch maps. Okay, so let's move on. Eichenwald. I really like Eichenwald. That's a primo Kino destination. It's so unique. I love the German castle. It looks like that. I was telling Kevin this the other day. The castle looks exactly like that playset castle we all had as kids with the boulder and the catapult. You know, if you know, you know. But I really like that about it. It's got a forest. It's got a big forest in the background, which makes it a little bit more naturalistic compared to other maps. And I'm always pushing for more nature in these maps. I feel like too many of them just default to cities, which gets a little boring sometimes. But this map being a German village that escalates up into a castle is really cool and really unique. Aesthetically, it is a little imbalanced, a little bit. It's a bit hard to play the defense side sometimes, but overall, I really like Eichenwald. I'm really sad it's out of rotation right now. I like the middle stretch for deathmatch. You'll hear me say that several times. But it's true, especially it's a good boop zone. A lot of booping to be done with like Lucio or Farah and stuff like that. So yeah, I really like Eichenwald a lot. While we're at it, let's rank the arena map that is adjacent to it, Black Forest. That's also a primo Kino destination. One of the most unique looking places to fight. And I really like it. It has the most nature of any fucking map in the game. I want more forests, damn it. Make an Eco Point Amazon, please. I really like the atmosphere of Black Forest. I also like the winter variant, which is very seasonal. Really like it. Speaking of arena maps, Eco Point Antarctica I do be vibing with. It was the original at the time just for duels, but now it's used for DTM and TDM, Team Deathmatch, and other things, and it's good for that purpose too. It was unique at the time, and it's less unique now that we have so many damn snowy maps, but it is still a really good arena map. Castillo is probably going to be also the same. I do be vibing with. I kind of like most of the arena maps, honestly. Necropolis is also fairly unique. I'm going to be going with that and do be vibing with. What's the other arena map here? Is that all of them? Yeah, that's all the smaller arena maps. But yeah, I do be vibing with them all, except for Black Forest, which I really like. It's a primo Kino destination. While we're here, we might as well talk about deathmatch maps. Chateau Girard is I do be vibing with. It was the first dedicated deathmatch style map, incorporating more Quake-esque design, and it was definitely one of the most successful examples of it. Like right off the bat, they kind of nailed it in terms of what a deathmatch map should play like in Overwatch. I really enjoy it. It's a nice, isolated, unique location as well. One thing I like about the deathmatch maps is the opportunity to have slightly more contained locations. So, yeah. Moving on. Petra is going to be an acceptable area. It's a good map. I enjoy playing on it. I do agree with the criticism, though, that it's probably the weakest of the dedicated deathmatch maps. It's a little spread out. It's a little big for 8 players. This is especially true in Bounty Hunter, which is only 6 players. As people have gotten better at navigating it, I think that's been less of a problem, but it is a little spread out, and sometimes it can just be hard to find people in Petra. It's a little too big, and it doesn't quite interconnect itself as well as the other ones, but I still like it. It's a unique location. Once again, it's fleshing out a singular unique location, being the Petra ruins in Jordan, which just the fact that I can say there's a location in Jordan of all places is unique in itself. So yeah, I do like Petra, but I do agree it is the weakest of the deathmatch maps. Kanazaka, however, is my favorite, and that's going in Primo Kino Destination. I wish this was still enabled for Team Deathmatch. I don't know why they took it out of that rotation, but I still played a lot in FFA, and actually I think that might be the only place you can play it now, which is really annoying because it means that you can't even use Kitako on her own home stage in a mode that she's actually good in, because if you play her in FFA, half her fucking abilities don't work, or do nothing. So that's annoying. I wish it was available in Team Deathmatch again. I don't know why the fuck they took it out, but it's a great fucking map. It's an urban Japanese environment, so you know I'm gonna love it. Yeah, like, I cannot heap enough praise. It's one of the most beautiful maps, and I love playing it. And to wrap up the Deathmatch maps is Melevento, which is also going to be a Primo Kino Destination. It's an Italian villa, which is another aesthetic I really enjoy. I think it has probably the best, next to Chateau, it's probably the best designed deathmatch map, facilitating a variety of playstyles and being very interconnected and looping in on itself very well, just like a great classic Quake design map. So I really like Malevento. Goddamn, I hope we get a 5th deathmatch map at some point for an event or something. It's not really part of the seasonal cadence, so I don't know where new arcade maps would fit into that, but damn, I want some more deathmatch maps. Make it happen, Blizzard. And let's round out the arcade maps with Ayutthaya, which is going to be a doobie vibing with. It's a good map. I think you used to be able to play Team Deathmatch on it. I think they took that away. I think now it's just I think it's only for CTF. I think. And maybe elimination, but I'm not sure. But yeah, you don't see a lot of Ayutthaya unless you play CTF. It's not enabled for Blitz anymore. It's just regular CTF, which is a little confusing because CTF Blitz and regular CTF kind of have slightly different pools. But yeah, Ayutthaya is, I think, exclusive to CTF. It was designed exclusively for Capture the Flag, and it works best for that purpose. I really want another CTF map to compare it to design-wise to see if they would do anything different, because I do think Ayutthaya is a little basic in terms of its design, because it feels like if you asked me what you would need for a CTF map specifically, it feels like sort of the bare essentials of what I would say you need for that, but it doesn't do anything particularly unique. It was kind of designed to be the premier place to play Capture the Flag, and that's what it does, and it does it very well, but I think it could be better. I also like that the aesthetics are split. They took the idea of a CTF map and being like, well, the territorial nature, the two-sided dichotomy of CTF as a game mode is best represented here because each side is slightly different. The spawns, while being perfectly symmetrical the same way control maps or push maps are, they have very different aesthetics, which I think makes them easy to read and also very unique. And I hope that continues if they ever make another CTF map, which I'm hoping one of these goddamn lunar events they'll come out with it. They'll just surprise us with a new CTF map, because I like CTF and I like Ayutthaya. I vibe with it, hence its inclusion in that category. Okay, on to the other maps here. Junkertown. Junkertown is going to be an acceptable area. I really like, especially First Point is very open. It has it's the closest Overwatch has ever come to looking like TF2, which is interesting and kind of refreshing. This shanty town in the wasteland of the Australian outback. I think progressing through the map, it gets a little bit less interesting, and there are some balance issues. Like Third Point defense spawn is really long and a bit unbalanced. This map is definitely very attacker favored, so it necessitates a lot of different strategies. There's definitely frustrations playing on Junkertown, so that kind of holds it back, but it is a great concept for a map, and it is one of the more interesting and unique aesthetically, but its design issues do hold it back for me, so it's firmly an acceptable area tier. In a similar vein, we'll go with Havana. I really like Havana aesthetically, but again, It is the premier sniper haven at the moment, and that can cause some issues. Again, I don't mind when maps encouraged it. And again, this might be just sort of a perspective situation. Right now in the new 5v5, there aren't as many countermeasures to snipers as there were before when you had an off tank to help peel. So I think that we need more hero-based solutions to that. So some of these sniper-favored maps are going to be a little bit lower on the totem pole for most people at the moment, just because there isn't as many answers to snipers that aren't just another sniper. And Havana is a very sniper-favored map, both on the first and third point. The second point's a bit more balanced, the distillery itself. First of all, a unique location, a cool-looking location to fight in. I really like the second point. I mean, I visually and conceptually, I like all the points. It's just right now the game doesn't have a lot of counterplay to snipers, so it's a bit lower. I would say when the game figures that out, I think this map used to be something I would vibe with more, but as of right now, it's an acceptable area. But one day I think it'll come back up when they sort of give more counterplay to snipers. Oasis. Oasis is a do be vibing with. Oasis is one of the few maps that has 3 times a day, evening, night, and day, and they all look great for different reasons. I like the uniqueness of each control point. I like playing CTF on fucking University, I think is the one that you do that on. So yeah, it's a great map. It's very this Arabian aesthetic is very unique for the game. I really enjoy it. So yeah, I vibe with it. Rialto I also do be vibing with. Again, anything Italian architecture I'm going to like. It's based on an adjacent area to Venice. I've always loved Venice aesthetically and conceptually. The river that snakes through it, all of the water and a lot of water to knock people into, the bridge in the center. It's a good thing. It does have kind of the problem of ending in a facility, but it's such a short portion of it that I don't really mind. And plus, it's a Talon base, and those are cool. So, yeah, I do like Rialto. It's a little imbalanced, maybe a little bit, but I do like it. Paraiso. I vibe with Paraiso. Again, this sort of Brazilian favela look, very unique. I like the increased verticality that they've been experimenting with in Overwatch 2 maps, where you're essentially climbing up a steep urban hill to the Club Synesthesia, or is it Sinistra? I think it's Synesthesia. The actual club area, I'm a little bit more mixed on aesthetically. I just think they could have pushed it a bit further. There's also a lot of wasted space. I'm really hoping the club area becomes a deathmatch map at some point, a deathmatch crop at some point, because there's a lot of side areas for the respawn points and just around the area that you don't really get to fight in much because everyone is so focused on the main point. So I really hope that's the case at some point. But even so, I really enjoy Paraiso. I like playing it. Let's go to Circuit Royale. Circuit Royale is an acceptable area. I think it's probably my least favorite of the maps that came with 2's launch. This goes for a lot of wasted space. Like, has there ever been much reason to fight in the pool by the casino? Not really. It's a cool flanking route that doesn't get a whole lot of use. Otherwise, this, especially even by escort map standards, there's very little reason to deviate too far from the payload track on this one, which is a little upsetting. I also think it's held back a bit by the fact that the third point is it all builds up to this ritzy casino that has no casino things in it. This is presumably an ESRB problem, that they can't include like references to gambling, which is weird because there's a bazillion bars and taverns and clubs in this game, which is weird that you can have this much alcohol around but can't show a fucking roulette table. It's also especially weird for a game that used to have loot boxes, so you could actually gamble, but you couldn't show gambling. Like the last point looks nice, but it's really begging for some slot machines on the walls or some roulette tables spread around, but it just has none of that. Not even like a deck of cards, which is kind of weird. It's supposed to be a fancy, ritzy casino resort, but it just doesn't quite nail that feeling because they can't really include... They presumably, I don't even know for sure, but I presume that's the reason they couldn't include any like actual gambling apparatuses in Circa Royale. But I do like the upward swerve through the midsection of the track. It can be a little frustrating sometimes, but I like that the map forces you to play it differently, and I like the increased verticality. One of these days, I'm hoping we get a payload map they figure out a way to make it just a big spiral. That'd be cool. But until then, I like the experiment on verticality. Since it has the exact same fucking layout, I'm gonna go. Shambali is a primo kino destination. Pro tip about Shambali Monastery: it has the exact same payload track layout as Circuit Royale. It's slightly in a different position, but yeah, it's kind of the same layout. Obviously the level geometry and aesthetic are very different around that track, but the track is the same, which is interesting that they would recycle it like that. I wish they would have at least flipped it. But I really like the aesthetic of Shambali. I really enjoy playing on Shambali. So up Shambali goes. It's a great payload track. Blizzard World is also a primo kino destination. As a longtime Blizzard fan, I love all of the fan service and homages in this level. I love the concept of this level. It's so creative. It's so meta. I love it a lot. I love Blizzard World. I'm not even going to get into there's some occasional frustrations gameplay wise, but I don't even care because I just love the idea and the execution of the map too much. Busan is also a primo kino destination, especially the night variant. This is a control map where all three maps feel very distinctly different. The mecha base, the shrine, and the downtown area are all very distinct, but also very distinctly Korean, and I really enjoy them all, especially the night variant of downtown, which is beautiful. And it has the cow, so I mean, automatically it wins. Busan is probably I would say it's my favorite control map, but also I really like Antarctic Peninsula, which I might as well talk about it now since we're here. Antarctic Peninsula, this might just be recency bias, but I really enjoy how different this feels to other control maps. Every point feels very different, not only from each other, but also from every control map point we've had beforehand. It feels like they're really experimenting with different things with Antarctic Peninsula, and I enjoy all of what they're trying to do. I especially like the labs section where the point is sort of cascading down toward the point and all the geometry is raised above it. That's very interesting. I enjoy all of the tight hallways of the underground section. I really like the icebreaker ship. That's a very unique idea for a point, and it works super well. I really like playing Antarctic Peninsula. It's great. It's a great map. It's a great return for Control, which hasn't had a new map since 2018 with Busan. And I really like it. I really like Antarctic Peninsula. Midtown fucking slaps. That goes in Primo Kino. I love how this map makes you feel like you're in the heart of an urban jungle with the tall buildings and flying cars up ahead. I really like the brown and green neo art deco aesthetic this goes for. It's very uniquely, it's like New York if we took the sort of old school, fashion of New York City and sort of applied retro sort of futurism to it, missing all of the bland architecture we have these days in the middle, and just sort of really taking that old classic art deco style and modernizing it and futurizing it, and it looks so cool. I love it. I love the subway portions. I love the scaffolding. I love the fact that it's a fucking fire truck you're escorting. I love their rendition of Grand Central Station. I love it. I've never even been to New York, but obviously New York has a lot of aesthetic significance to me as an American, and I really like their futuristic rendition of it here. It's probably in my mind, it's one of the most successful examples of them just taking a city and futurizing it, and I really enjoy it. Midtown slaps. And also the music that loads up when you first load into the map is also one of the best. All the music's good, but that music in particular gets you really hyped to play Midtown. I love Midtown. And now for the push maps. Okay, so I like push. Some people really don't, but I like push. I think it's good, so let's rank these maps. I'm going to say that New Queen Street is a primo Kino destination. It's one of the most aesthetically unique. This combination of blue, white, and red, the red leaves with all the snow, is very unique. It has the Toronto architecture is also very distinct, and you can sort of recognize the inspiration from various buildings and whatnot. And I think it's a good showcase for Push as a game mode and how different the map design has to be to accommodate that. I appreciate that. Colosseo, I do be vibing with. I like Colosseo. It's taken me a while to come around in it, but I do like Colosseo quite a bit. I love the hallway of death. I like the subversion, the fact they're already subverting on the push formula by having that little on both sides. You have to sort of corral the robot up in a spiral a bit. It has to like do a full turn into the last point. I really like that about it. The only thing I don't like about this map is, and it's also a beautiful aesthetic. I really like the how the city looks in the distance. It's very nice. It's both maintaining the architecture of the past and building a lot of future shit over top of it, which is really interesting to me. The only thing I don't like about this map is that the forward spawn doesn't give you that much actual advantage, which I think makes playing this map a little frustrating sometimes, that the forward spawn isn't as forward as it could be because it has to accommodate the hallway of death in the center. And this is definitely probably the push map where winning that first fight matters the most, but I still really like Colosseo. And Esperanza, I'm going to say that as well is a map I do be vibing with. Again, I'm getting a little tired of stock European cities, but there is something a little bit different about Portuguese architecture, and I have a lot of fun on Esperanza. It's doing very similar things to New Queen Street, but it has different geometry. It has more high ground. It has more underpasses. It has even more of a... Well, it has like not even more, but it has like the same level of like going where like the buildings separate the winding path, but you can go through them as well. I would actually say that Esperanza is a little bit more successful in that regard than New Queen Street because it has more access to high ground in those areas, and every swerve of the path feels more like it's entrenched compared to New Queen Street, but that's fine. Yeah, I like Push, and all three Push maps have been a success for me so far. I'm really looking to see what the fourth one has in store. So, yeah, that's going to be my ranking for every Overwatch map currently in the game. When they add a certain amount of new maps, I'll probably come back to this and reevaluate my existing opinions on these maps as well as my opinions on new maps. We're getting a new core mode at some point this year. That's probably going to come with 3 maps of its own. I imagine that's either going to come in Season 5 or Season 7, and whatever one it doesn't come in is going to have its own map later, and they might even give us a deathmatch map at some point as a surprise. I hope so. So hopefully after this year there will be even more maps for me to rank, so maybe next year tune back and I'll do another map ranking. But until then, this is where my opinions stand. As you can see, I like most maps in the game, honestly. There's only 5 in these bottom 2 tiers, so that just goes to show how solid overall maps in the game generally are. And I look forward to each and every new addition. Yeah, so that's all my opinion on the maps. Z Freak out. Ciao ciao for now.